everybody, this is Grant Burgess, and I'm going to do another Ableton tutorial, this time a little bit more advanced. So this is separate from the course that I'm teaching at the college out here in Portland. This is something a little closer to my heart, and that is taking samples from compound time samples into a 4/4 beat. So you should have a pretty decent understanding of how to chop samples, and I know I'm going to do them differently than you do, so just kind of try to follow along and we'll see where we can go. So usually for me, there are 3 ways to chop a sample. This sample that I have here it's in 6/8, and I'll just play it for you really quickly. So that's about all I think I'll use from that. So the first of 3 ways to do that is to just kind of let it ride. If it's a 6/8 sample, sometimes you just want to leave it the way it is. 6/8 will go on top of 4/4 drums, and anything else you do, you'll get these weird little sounds, and you'll see that in a second. So let's say I just want the maybe 8 bars. So there's these 3 hits you can see here. We're going to take those out. So let's listen to it. Now I've pressed Command 4, and what that does is that basically, so these little lines in here that are going to make it so you can only click, so you can't click between them, as you see. When you press 4, it just gets to, you can click anywhere you want. So I'm going to listen to these first 3 hits, and then I'm going to take them out, and I'm going to start us on the 1. So I want that first hit, and I'll get pretty close. That sounds fine to me. And Control E, I get that, or Command E rather, I get that by itself. I'll just delete what I don't need. Okay, so I'm just going to take, if it's in 6/8, then we can count the bars like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So right about here, I think it's going to be right here or here. It's going to be another kick that kind of starts the next set of bars. So let's take a listen. It kind of sweeps in. Let's take this second hit over here, somewhere around there, and it'll kind of fade those edges for us. So another Command E, and I will just delete this side. So now I've got my bars. Now in 6/8, if you are having a hard time counting to know where a bar starts and ends, usually the snare will be on 4 and the counts seem faster. So the counts are actually usually faster than a 4/4 beat. So with this, there isn't a heavy kick, but it would be kick, 2, 3, snare, 5, 6. So see if you can count with that. 4, 4. Yeah, so if you can hear that snare, that's what that's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and Command J just to consolidate that so I don't have to mess with it again. And I'm going to copy it, and I'll paste it over here. Now I have some drums written and ready to go. Really cheap and easy drums. There's nothing special about them, but we're going to deal with those later. So right now we've got this sample here, and we're at 87 beats per minute. We're just going to really simply right click and warp it as a 4-bar loop. So you'll see these snares are lining up there, or rather, I don't know what hit that is. Yeah, that's the snare. But when you're stretching something that much, you can either make it much shorter. That sounds silly. That sounds nasty. So what I do, I usually go to repitch, just like I'm slowing a record down. And you get some interesting things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So with this, it'll be much lower. So I mean, that's pretty sad. But I'll throw these drums in just to kind of hear if it lines up, and you'll be able to hear how the 6/8 and the 4/4 play off of each other. You hear these weird kind of clicking in the background, and that's the hi-hat from the original sample. And if you like that, and I've used those before, so if you like that, keep it in and you're done. You can kind of hear where those clicks are coming from. So that's one way that you can do it. But I think that there are kind of more interesting ways to do it. So the second way that I usually, and this is actually the thing I'd say most of the time I do, is if we go back to our original sample, what you'll find is you can trick it, or rather I guess just kind of chop it up to sound like a 4/4 sample. However, it definitely sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. So, and with this one, I think it'll work pretty well. But you have to count it like it's 4/4. So normally we would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if we do, so it would be, now this is very fast, so it's kind of difficult to hear it. You're going to have to really play with it and get very used to how things sound. But with this, if you know the snare is here. Okay, so if we want to get Command E, we'll get that snare by itself. We know that a snare should land on, depending on how you're counting it, on 3. Or I guess 2, but in hip hop, it's usually hat, snare. So if we have, so it would be roughly 1, 2, 3. And right here where this hat is, will probably be where the snare goes. So let's go ahead, let's see if we can loop that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So if we can bring this snare in on the 3, then that essentially works as our snare if it were a 4/4. So we're kind of dropping out a cut there. So that already kind of sounds a little bit closer. And again, you're really going to have to play with that to get an ear for where that sits. The snare is just a really good place to be able to know exactly where you are on the beat. So if at any point in time you're like, oh, I know count 3 goes here, put a snare there and see if it sounds right, and that'll usually give you some indication. So now we pretty much have, now that we kind of understand this is 1, 2, 3, well, this right here, this is going to be 4. And so we kind of know that right here is going to be where the next 1 goes. Now, we've already kind of messed up the 6, the pattern of 6/8 notes. So we can pretty much just decide what we think 1 should be. We have this hit. We have this hit. Or we could even do this. And that already has that 1, 2 snare. 1, 2 snare. So why don't we pull that in? See how that sounds. We'll get right on that hi-hat right there. Now you hear the little guitar lick in the background is a little weird, so we're kind of gambling here to see how it's going to work. So if we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 right there, that's where we want our new hit to go. So we're just going to slide this over and see how that goes. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe we can pull something from here to kind of smooth that part out. Let's see if something from before this hat makes the whole thing sound better. Okay, So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we can decide where that next one is going to be coming from. And I think it's actually going to be coming from that hit. So I'm going to Command E, and let's count back into where the 1 would be. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So it's going to be right in here. Oops. I think it's right here. It's kind of hard to tell because it's going by so fast. So, okay, so that's coming in at about the right time. Maybe nudge it back just a little bit. Yeah, we'll let those actually take it right like that. That sounds good. Okay, so if this is our 1, again, we're looking for that snare to drop in on 3. So it sounds like this is the snare. Okay. So we're going to cut that. And then this hat is actually happening on the 3 after this one. So 1, 2, 3. So why don't we bring that snare into that 3? I'm getting closer so I can get a better look at it. And right there. Okay, so so far all right, so we're almost there. We only have one more to do. So we have a choice again to make on what we want our 1 to be. 1. What if we make this hat? It already has the snare on 3. If you hear 1, 2, 3. So that might be good for us. So let's take it from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So it looks like it's going to be this little part right here. So we're going to drag that up. And then let's hear how it all sounds together. We're going to have a little extra sitting on the end. So we're definitely going to want to trim some of that off. But this is what it's like together. Okay, so that sounds like it's in 4/4 to me. 3, 4, 1. So these last 2 little hits, actually I think that gets excluded as well. Okay, so all together. And let's actually duplicate that, see if it loops back into itself. Well, let's just Command D. All right, that's not bad. We'll undo that. And we're going to, we'll go ahead and just consolidate that. Command J. I don't want to be peeking out a little bit. No, we're okay. Okay, so let's just go ahead and copy that over. So this is the second version. Remember the first one we had was we left it in 6/8. So this one, we're going to warp it as a 2-bar loop, just like normal. And let's hear how it sounds. At the very end of that, get a little bit of something. Is it here? Find out. No, it's in the very beginning. Let's try that. Let's try and just take off the very front of that. We're going to crop it, warp it as a 2-bar loop again. Okay, so it looks like some of these need to be trimmed up a little bit. So we're going to move. Okay, let's try it with drums. And I think you can already hear that if you were to slice that all up and put it into kind of an MPC drum rack here in Ableton, it would slice pretty easily and it would sound pretty good. So the last way that I would do this, and it's really rare that I would do it, but sometimes it works. Usually it ends up working for people who are more into hardware than software, but I figured why not give it a try. If I go ahead and freeze this whole track, flatten it, and I go back up to the first one that I did, this one that was still in 6/8. Okay, so what we can do with this, we'll just go ahead and copy and paste that. We can slice this to a new MIDI track. Now I already have my own preset for it. And I'll show you. There's not much to it, but it definitely helps me. So if I put a warp marker, start of every bar and in the middle of every bar, I'll slice it to the new MIDI track, and there we go. I always have to set my volume up. Now, I don't know the math on this, so it might be wrong, but so right now, if I trigger one of these samples, bring that down a little bit. So it's still really slow and it's still in 6/8. So again, I don't know the math on this, but if we turn it up six semitones there, these hi-hats in the background should actually line up. With the 4/4 tempo that it's in. So let's listen to the drums. Yeah, so those line up pretty well with the drums. So if you don't have this whole setup, kind of a preset on your slices, these are all very simple things that you can find. So all you'd have to do is, if you're using sampler, go into pitch, and then right here is a transpose. And if you transpose all of them by hand up to 6 semitones up, then they should adjust like that. Adjusting them like that does change their speed, obviously, and so that's what we're kind of banking on. So you have to kind of balance pitch and speed there. If you don't have this kind of a setup where you have the preset made, I can try and put a link down below of where I learned to do that and how I got it kind of set up the way that I want to. So, but those are the 3 ways that I generally deal with 3/4 and 6/4 samples. If there are any other ways that you can think of, or any videos that you can point anyone to, please feel free to comment below. And I think that's it for this time. Thanks for watching. Bye.